My name is Ian Adamson, and I am a legal forensic expert working at Robson Forensic.
Okay. Where are you testifying from today?
My location is Boulder, Colorado.
Okay. Give us a little bit about your educational background, sir.
Sure. I've been working at Robson since 2019 and I provide technical investigation analysis reports and testimony toward the resolution of commercial and personal injury litigation involving ziplines, zipline parts, ropes courses, and other areas, including failure analysis. I'm also currently the president of World Obstacle, which is an international federation governing obstacle sports worldwide. We are an Olympic sport. Prior to that, I was the president and CEO of an organization called Healthy Running, which provided continuing education credit for medical professionals, including physicians, fitness professionals, etc., worldwide. That is not my area of expertise for this. Prior to that, I was 7 years at heading up product, medical, and education at Newton Running Company. That's a running shoe manufacturer in Boulder, Colorado. Prior to that, I was a contractor and consultant for International Management Group, which produces competitions and television shows globally for many sporting and multi-sport events, including those with ziplines. Prior to that, I was a professional athlete for 11 years, primarily with Nike. And that was competing in athletic events, including those with ziplines. Prior to that, I was a race director in many places around the world. I was also a mechanical engineer at Telectronic Spacing Systems from 1988 to 1997. And that was an engineering designer, then product line manager, then senior project manager at a company building implantable cardiac medical devices, including heart pacemakers, heart pacemaker leads, and other products.
Okay. Let's go kind of chronological. So I detect a bit of an accent. Where are you from?
I was born in Sydney, Australia.
Okay. When did you come to the United States?
1991.
How old were you?
I was 26.
Why come here?
I was brought over by the biomedical engineering company I worked for. My job at that time was a mechanical engineering designer. I helped facilitate the move of products from the Australian factories to the factories in Florida, actually Fort Lauderdale in Florida. So that was my primary job. It was temporary, but they wanted me to stay, so ended up becoming a citizen of the United States, and I've been here ever since.
Very good. What's your educational background? Like just kind of raw college education?
Sure. Mechanical engineer, honors degree, emphasizing biomedical engineering or biomechanical engineering, and then a master's degree in sports medicine at Chapman College, Orange County, California.
Okay. And how did you get this case? How were you contacted?
The Robson office contacts me. I work as an employee of Robson, and they bring forward cases that they think might be suitable for my areas of expertise, and then I evaluate whether or not I'm willing to testify or provide an opinion on those cases.
And you were retained by our office?
That is correct. And
what did you review?
The information I reviewed included images. There is, I should say, transcripts of the depositions of various parties involved in the incident and the complaint.
Okay. And I assume you're not testifying for free today?
I am not.
And I assume you didn't take this case out of purely charitable means?
I do not. This is my job.
Okay. So tell us about your kind of rates of compensation and how we've paid you to be here today.
I don't bill. I do the work. So as an expert, I do the work. The Robson Forensic Office does the billing, and my my rate, I believe, is $430 an hour. And that's all done through the Robson office. That allows me to do the work and not get concerned with any of the business of the testimony or anything that's related to it. So I avoid all of the business and legal side, and I simply work on the forensic side.
Have you given a deposition before today?
I have.
Have you testified in other cases?
I have.
Can you give the jury some information about kind of your history as an expert?
Sure. So I was engaged in 2019. As I said, that's my first experience as an expert witness.
I'm sorry.
That happened.
Could you tell the date again?
I was 2019. I believe my first case was somewhere around the third quarter of 2000. Started around the third quarter of 2019. That happened because I had been approached quite frequently to be an expert on cases. I was not comfortable doing that at the time, and I didn't, frankly, have the time to do it. However, I'm also a member of various standards working groups developing international standards and national standards for ziplines and related things like aerial adventure courses. So I was approached, eventually agreed to take a meeting with Robson, which led to the job that I have today. Since then, I actually have no idea how many cases are ongoing, probably in the neighborhood of 40 I'm working on currently. Over that time, every case to this point that I've worked on has settled before trial. So I do get to do depositions and testimony routinely.
And have you had the opportunity to represent the defendant as well as plaintiffs?
I have. My work involves both. I'm impartial as an expert. It's simply the facts. The facts being for the plaintiff or defendant, or the attorneys for, and consequently, I like to represent either side. It gives a deep insight into how these incidents happen and whether or not there's a positive or negative opinion for either side. It's simply facts for me.
How did you progress? I guess particularly related to zip lines. Like how did you become an expert related to the use or proper use of zip lines?
I started a long time ago. Without getting too far into it, I have a climbing background. Rock climbing involves many things, including accessing the climbs. Sometimes you need a thing called a Tyrolean traverse, which you set up basically a zip line for yourself to access something. When I was competing, and that started in the 1980s, the competitions included zip lines and Tyrolean traverses. As I became an event director, which is part of my background with IMG. So in the 1990s, I started building and directing events, including zip lines. For competitions, it's a little bit different. There's some different things involved, but they're essentially the same. It's generally a descending cable or rope on which people are attached, and then they slide down that cable or rope to the end, and then you have to arrest their speed. That then evolved into television shows. I did one in Las Vegas for the Professional Bull Riding World Finals. And that then led to building commercial ones. So one of my jobs has been to build out the Margarita Adventure Zipline Tour. Actually, that's behind me and in my image. I started that in 2010. It's ongoing. We're still building it. I'm actually the engineering designer, so I assist with those that do the actual work. That includes the surveyors, soils engineers, mechanical engineers, structural engineers, architects, and all the people involved in the zip line itself, plus the safety mechanisms.
What is the Margarita Tour?
Margarita Adventures is a set of 6 zip lines The first one is quite long. It's over half a mile. It's actually 4 cables. We call them stacked cables, 2 sets of dual stacked cables. That requires a significant amount of safety because at speed, there is injury involved, as is always the case. So that's a hazard. And to mitigate the hazard, we incorporate 4 sets of safety mechanisms, from traffic lights to mechanical stops to communication systems, and then 3 sets of braking at the end, because braking is necessary. A very important part of zip lines is to have effective braking mechanisms to arrest the speed of the patron on the line.
Kind of simple question. Why is braking so important?
Speed is a hazard. If you hit something at speed, or if you're exposed to that hazard and you're moving quickly, and you could hit something, that's a dangerous condition. And that's extremely important to prevent injury, or in some cases, fatalities on zip lines.
Okay. You talked about, being directly involved with engineering and design of zip lines. And we're going to get into discussion about this particular case in an instant, but I guess we're going to have people with different experiences, right? Some might have been on a recreational zip line. Some may have only seen it on TV. Some none at all. And I guess what I want to understand from somebody who's been involved with engineering and design, let's get real simple about what a zip line is and what it's intended to do.
Sure. Would you like me to just describe on the most basic level a zip line?
Please.
If you take it to the most common and most basic example, it may include someone who decides to set up a backyard zip line. I'm talking about someone who might have the crazy idea to use a clothesline and then throw something over it to slide down the clothesline down the back of their yard. You see these things occasionally. You can buy stuff online. The online stores generally have good information on the safety, and they sell braking systems and other paraphernalia or apparatus to assist with the person or the people making the lines to provide a level of safety. And the information is quite good. They describe what you're supposed to do and what you shouldn't do. That's very basic. So it's a sloping line. You slide down it. They're super fun. They're very common. Many people are exposed on vacation to zip lines. They know about zip lines. That many people know what they are. And Costa Rica is actually very common. They were one of the first countries to do this, and it's very accessible to North Americans. So you'll find a lot of people from the US will have found out about zip lines or been on them for the first time in somewhere like Costa Rica, where they're fairly rudimentary, but they're fun, in the forest. They go between trees in that case. From backyard zip lines to commercial ones, part of it evolved out of what we call the aerial adventure course industry. So aerial adventure courses actually came out of high ropes courses originally. High ropes courses came out of the 1970s. It was often used for team building and corporate training. Still around today. There's a lot of them around today. That's how the industry standards and the consensus standards started being developed, because with height and with speed, which are hazards, then inevitably there's exposure to those hazards, and then that creates a dangerous condition. So consequently, the industry started self-regulating industries, and the emergence of the American National Standards Institute standards for the Professional Ropes Course Association and the Association of Challenge Course Technology, both of which produce standards for this. And then ASTM International, which is also a standards organization, has a standard as well. So because of the exposure to the hazards involved, the industry and now the wider community in the space have developed very good standards for this.
And that was kind of my next questions. What is the Professional Ropes Course Association, and what's your involvement with them?
Yeah, so I'm a member of all of these organizations. The It's a long name, but technically the PRCA, Professional Ropes Course Association, is an organization that provides standards for challenge courses, adventure parks, canopy tours, zip lines. And this is for design, performance, inspection, installation of the equipment, the operations, the training, and the certifications.
What do you mean by standards?
What do we mean by standards? Well, standards are a minimum level of requirements for safety for the most part. There's many things involved, but safety is extremely important. That's why we call them safety standards. The PRCA standard is a safety standard for zip lines and other things. Okay. Same with the ACCT standard. It's effectively the same thing, another industry group that does basically the same standards. They're not the same, but they're a similar standard covering these things, as does ASTM. ASTM is a little different. PRCA and ACCT are industry standards or provide industry safety standards. The ASTM is a consensus standard. So that involves people from industry, but also from other areas. Now, it's under a wider group. It's called Committee 24, and within Committee 24, there's many standards groups. One of them includes the practice group for aerial adventure courses, which covers zip lines. Okay. So there's engineers, there's people from Disney World that make amusement attractions. It's actually, we call it the amusement group, but it doesn't matter what the group's called. The aerial adventure course design standards are a lot more comprehensive than the industry standards from the technical aspects, because there's a lot of engineers and people who are professionals building amusement attractions like aerial adventure courses and zip lines.
Okay. Do organizations like the Professional Ropes Course Association, ASTM, and the Association for Challenge Course Technology set standards related to obstructions?
They do. There's some.
Tell us about that.
Sure. So each of those standards has a requirement to keep the areas where people land or move free from obstructions. Movement can be at the start, throughout the zip line, or at the finish. So for the entire length of that zip line, it should be free of obstructions.
And I've ziplined, and I've seen a lot of zip lines on television. It seems to me, and here's what I want you to kind of explain, is where the person attaches to the zip line itself. It can be in a number of different designs. Is that fair?
Yeah, there are various ways to attach to a zip line. And would you like me to describe what some of those are?
Please.
Sure. The most common way to attach someone to a zip line is with a harness, somewhat like a climbing harness, and sometimes a climbing harness that is designed specifically to keep the rider, one, attached to the zip line so that they can't come in contact with anything else or anything dangerous, and two, keep them in an orientation that prevents them from getting in a bad position on the zip line, for instance, turning backwards or sideways, which can create a danger in itself or a hazard. The harnessing systems usually are what we call full body harnesses with two attachments, and both the attachments do a few things. One, they're safety backup, so you need two because that's a backup, so redundancy. And then secondly, keeps the person ideally facing forward, which is possible with two attachments, and thirdly, keep them upright. So that's why, in general, in the industry, you'll see these full body harnesses with two tethers attaching to commonly a zipline trolley. A zipline trolley, it's like a little set of wheels that sits on the cable, and that allows the cable to the trolley and the rider to stay straight. You can put a single pulley on. That's not particularly effective. People use them, but they're pretty rudimentary. I've never actually seen it in a commercial zipline or one where people, patrons, are allowed to go on them because they allow the rider to get in a strange position. Also commonly handlebars, also attached specifically to what we call a zipline trolley. These handlebars help the rider stay upright. They help them stay oriented, and they're just they're not holding the rider up, so the rider doesn't need to use the bars to support their weight. They're simply a way for them to stay oriented properly, and to assist in the landing part of the operation. Also, because you don't want them to get in these strange orientations.
What is rigging? I think that's exactly what you're describing, but what is rigging?
Rigging is, well, there's various rigging. So we've got the rigging of the zip lines themselves. That would be the cable, the supports, or the apparatus around it. Then there's what we call personal safety equipment. That's rigging that would be attached on the rider and from the rider to the zipline cable, which would generally include the harness, the tethers, the trolley, and the handles.
Okay. So we've talked about rigging. We've talked about kind of the overall layout of what a zipline is. What instruction is required to the consumer before they engage in a zipline activity?
Well, if you don't mind, may I back up and
Yes.
describe a little bit more about the zipline rigging itself?
Sure.
Let
me. We're dealing with a record, so let me ask the question. Can you give us more information about? I talked about rigging. Can you give us more information about zipline rigging and then elaborate about standards and protocols?
Sure. One of the most important things on a zipline is to understand the speed at which a rider can attain on a zipline. Now, that will depend on the rider's weight, their orientation, their body shape, the wind direction, the temperature, which can affect the tightness of the zipline. These things contribute to the rider's speed. It's important to understand that when you're setting up a zipline, because you also have to set up the brakes. Now, the brakes are important because that's what arrests the speed of a rider. Brakes take many forms. The industry standards and requirements within the industry are to have a braking system. And a system means not just one thing, but multiple brake systems that work together to arrest the rider in a manner that prevents them hitting something. So colliding with an obstruction, preventing them from, say, swinging up too fast or stopping too fast. Just like a car, you don't want to jam the brakes on all of a sudden, stop so fast that you hit the front of the car. Zip lines are like that. You want to brake gently enough that it doesn't harm the rider. The braking systems, we call them integrated braking systems. You typically have what we call a passive brake. A passive brake is one that does not require human input. Humans have a way of getting things wrong. So we like to put in brakes, and we generally require brakes that are passive, meaning there's no rider input or anyone else's input for that matter. An active brake is regarded as, and in practice is quite unreliable, because that would rely on other people or another person, maybe even the rider, braking themselves. That's a challenge. That's actually a problem in the industry, which is why it's very rarely used now, because people, they may not be paying attention, they may get distracted, they may get bitten by a bee. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy stuff happens to people. And if that happens and they are the brake, if the person is the brake, that can have a very bad outcome. It's hard for a human to judge something like speed and weight and those sort of things. If a person is coming down a zip line toward the end, and if they're coming in quickly enough and they're relying on another person to brake them, the other person in practice may have a very difficult time judging how much braking to apply to that other person, which And that in itself is can create a dangerous condition. So we don't do that in the industry. We have passive brakes. There's many available, many passive brakes, passive braking systems. And we say a system because you generally have more than one. And there's also a requirement for what we call an emergency arrest device. That's a very important piece of equipment on all zip lines because we call it an EAD, emergency arrest device. The EAD, if all else fails, it's like an airbag, right? If all else fails, your brakes fail in your car and you hit something, the airbag blows. And that's what an EAD is. It's effectively like that. It's this thing that no matter whatever happens, the worst possible scenario, you have this brake, an EAD, which is an emergency apparatus that if everything else goes wrong, you truly can't get badly injured. We always require EADs because that's a redundancy that prevents injury, well, mitigates the injury and reduces the chance of someone getting badly injured.
Okay. And I guess what variables, whether you're talking about a 9-year-old, I don't even know how 50, 60, 70 pound child or, people of a certain age and a certain stature that are larger in nature, what needs to be taken into account to suit both of them with safe standards on a zip line?
The rider size and weight and the conditions when that rider is on the zip line varies significantly. So when we design zip lines, we specify maximum and minimum weights. We specify maximum and minimum wind speed and direction, and various other things to make sure that we have accommodated in the zipline design the range of weights, body shapes, and environmental conditions which are allowable for use of that zipline. We don't simply throw someone on and say, hey, go down the zipline without knowing those things. So that's part of the zipline design. And in your example of a small child who may be at the very bottom end of the weight range, they will behave differently. Their movement and the physics of that small person will be different from a larger, heavier person. And we need to take those into consideration.
Give me a brief lesson on gravity. Why is or physics, I guess. Why is a smaller person gonna react differently on a zip line than a heavier person?
Let's talk about a smaller person will be generally lighter in weight. A small person who is light in weight has less mass, so they're a smaller, lighter thing. If you think of it like the physics of it, consequently, the resistances of the zipline trolley, wind resistance, and other factors have more of an effect on a small person as opposed to a big person. Now, because of that, if you have relatively more resistance, then you'll travel slower. A big person, as they drop in height, and this is what causes the speed. So as something falls, whether it's straight down or at a slope, like going down a steep hill, or even a gentle hill for that matter, as they go down the hill, they tend to pick up speed until there's enough wind resistance or other resistance on the cable or whatever that it slows them down, or gravity for that matter. Sometimes zip lines have what we call a gravity brake. Gravity brake would be where the zip line it goes down to start with, then it has like a belly in it. We call that the drape. And then you go uphill after hitting the middle. So now you're going uphill, so now you're going against gravity. And most people appreciate this if you go down a hill in a car. You go down the hill and there's a dip and then you go back up the other side. You have to put the gas on to get up the other side. With no gas, you just come to a stop. And that's what happens in a zip line. So there's the gravity brake effect. Some people use actually water. In this case, it was over a pond. The incident occurred after the zip line went across a pond. And it's not uncommon for zip line designers to use water as part of the brake. So it's kind of gentle, right? You kind of come down the zip line, maybe drag your feet into the water. And by the time you get down to the shallows, you come to a stop and you just step off. So that's not uncommon.
Newton's first law, object in motion stays in motion. Am I saying that right?
Third law.
Third law. Thank you. So how does Newton's third law, have to be adjusted on a zip line for it to safely operate, right? And I think we've talked about some of the EADs and the different ways to stop, but how important is it for an object in motion to slow down or stop?
So you need an opposing force. Rudimentary of probably high school physics, you may learn that the force, the amount of force of an object is related to its mass and its acceleration. So F equals ma, very simply. Force equals mass times acceleration. Bigger mass or more acceleration, more force. So a big rider, which has got a big mass, will need a lot of force to stop them. So a big rider like Mr. Robertson, he was apparently quite a large gentleman, not a small child, with a big mass, big force. Big force means you need a lot of opposing force to bring them to a stop. So basically the brake needs to be effective to accommodate someone of his size without knowing the environmental conditions or whether or not there was a tailwind or a headwind. He achieved enough speed in this incident that, according to the evidence, he got badly injured hitting the end, which is, of course, that's what we design everything to avoid, providing appropriate braking for appropriate size and mass. Hence your question about Newton's laws of motion and Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, is one way to say it, meaning the opposite reaction in this case would be the brake at the end. So he's coming down the zip line, he's achieved some speed, now he's got a lot of force. We need a lot of force to stop the rider. That would be the brake.
Objection to the form.
Okay. The kind of last area that I want to discuss before we get into the specific facts of this case is instruction of the consumer on a commercial zip line. What are the standards?
This is the supervision area. So on zip lines, there should be sufficient supervision to mitigate any of the hazards. We know from height and speed, there are hazards that are intrinsic to height and speed. If that height and speed results in, say, exposure to an obstruction on the zip line, which was the case here, then there needs to be sufficient supervision to prevent that possible interaction with the person and the obstruction. So the supervision includes many things: training, instruction, sufficient that the rider would know what the potential hazards are and how to avoid them, if that's the case. So supervision is necessary. How to put the harness on, how to attach the rider for them. That's the supervision we're talking about.
Very good. Bear with me. So I guess my question is, kind of what do you perceive as your role and function in this case? What were you hired to do?
I was hired to basically provide the facts, investigate and determine if the design, safety equipment.
Objection to form. You can go on.
Let me re-ask that. What did we hire you to do?
Well, the purpose of my investigation under the terms of our contract is for the investigation to determine if the design, safety equipment and course operations met the industry standard of care, and if the Hunt Club's actions were improper in a manner that caused the incident.
Well, what's your opinion? And we're going to get into more detail, but
sure.
Overall, what are your opinions as an expert in zip lines, as an expert who's designed them, who's tested them? What are your opinions in this case?
Sure. Well, there's multiple levels of failure. The failure of the Hunt Club to provide a landing zone free from obstructions their failure to provide a strap short enough to prevent Robertson hitting the landing platform, their failure to use a proper zipline braking system, their failure to warn Robertson that he could hit the landing platform if he lost his grip.
Can you go a little bit slower so I can write some of this down?
Sure. Would you like me to start again?
Please.
The failure of the Hunt Club to provide a landing zone free from obstructions, their failure to provide a strap short enough to prevent Robertson hitting the landing platform, their failure to use a proper zipline braking system, their failure to warn Robertson that he could hit the landing platform if he lost his grip on the zipline handlebar, and their failure to properly instruct Robertson of this hazard was improper, violated the industry standard of care, and created the dangerous condition that caused Robertson to collide with the landing platform and become injured.
His name's Robert Robinson, and sometimes I think you're referred to him as Robertson. Do you mean Mr.
Robinson? Robert Robinson.
Okay. So let's go through that. Did you come out from Colorado to Florida to view the premises here?
I did not.
Did you need to?
I did not.
Why not?
The photographic information and available information online is sufficient to make an opinion.
Okay.
Opinions.
And upon reviewing the photos, what did you see?
The photos show the landing zone. They show the overall zip line. They show what we call the departure tower or the departure platform, which is I believe was a rappel tower at one point or is. They show the landing zone from various angles, including the support posts for the zip line. They show some pool noodles strapped to the support post at the arrival end. They show the platform, which is a wooden structure, retaining walls with some sand on top of it at the edge of the lake or the pond. They show the landing platform, wooden structure, retaining wall, having been in the images that I have, it was cut off fairly recently. So there's sharp and jagged edges of the wooden structure that kind of lead into a very steep, about 45-degree angle ramp, which looks like it may have been done subsequent to building the structure. That's just a hypothesis. It's not a fact, but it has been cut off at an angle, which looks to be done to facilitate landing on the platform, which is actually very common in zip lines. You build a ramp. A ramp should be built for a zip line to remove or reduce the risk of someone hitting the ramp. So generally, these ramps are built at a slope and an angle where it's not possible to hit an edge. Not in this case. This one has sharp edges.
Okay. Based upon reasonable standards in the kind of world of engineering and designing zip lines, what were the failures with the design, in your opinion?
The brake is ineffective. The braking system, well, it's not exactly a system. So although the line does appear to have sag or drape, is what we call it. So it does go up a little bit at the bottom or the termination end, the arrival end. From the images that are available showing people on the zip line, as they descend the zip line, they are lifting their feet quite high, actually. They're kind of crouching into a crouching position to avoid hitting the platform. The images are very clear on this. You can see people going down the zip line. They're skimming the water, so they're getting very low to the water, which consequently brings them in line with the landing platform. To avoid hitting it, you see them getting into a crouching position and lifting their legs as high as they can so they don't hit the end. So the design of the landing platform is it's a hazard. and in fact creates a dangerous condition because people are coming down the zip line, and it's clear that they could, when in this case did, hit the landing platform edge. The brake is ineffective. It's an active brake. It may be, I've never seen a brake like this before, where two people are required for the brake to be effective. That doubles the probability of failure of the active brake, because if one of those people loses concentration or not paying attention, the brake is ineffective. That is a violation of the standards, because we require not just passive brakes, but ones that don't require multiple people to do these things. That's just an overall requirement of the standards, is to provide an effective brake that arrests a rider's speed, so that they the braking is, one, effective, so they don't hit anything, and two, is done in a manner where their speed isn't too high. Having two people with, in this case, holding a rope that was draped over the zipline cable has many ways it can go wrong. Whatever's on the cable itself could go under the rope. The rope could break. There's a lot of friction involved when a rope slides across a metal cable. The people holding the cable may not be paying attention. They may not be strong enough. They may be in the wrong position. They may not be able to get in a good position. In this case, to get in a good position, you would have to wade into the pond, which is an unusual thing to do without knowing the depth of the pond or the steepness of the slope leading to the edge of the pond. We don't know where those people would have had to have stand, or even if they could stand in the lake, to be in an appropriate position to adequately brake the person coming in on the zip line. So the brake is ineffective. And that is from the testimony as well. It was not effective. The zip line, the builders of the zip line, including Mr. Zock, knew people could hit the end post because they put pool noodles on the post. So they knew, or should have known, that someone coming in would require an effective braking system. And they knew, or should have known, that that braking system could be ineffective because they put pool noodles on the post. There's no reason to put pool noodles on a post unless someone could hit it. And I believe the testimony says something to that effect. So that would be, in the most rudimentary and ineffective form, an emergency arrest device, although pool noodles clearly are not an effective EAD. The purpose was, I imagine, to prevent someone hitting the post so hard that they would get badly injured. Of course, if you hit the edge of the retaining wall on the ramp or on the platform before that, that's the thing that's going to arrest your speed.
Right. And obviously I've seen the photos and have talked to Mr. Robinson, but some questions I'm going to ask, just that of course I know the answer to, but what do you mean by pool noodles?
They are cylindrical floats that are commonly used in swimming pools, backyard swimming pools, for kids to play on, or people to play with. Typically they'd be like 4 to 6 feet long, maybe 4 to 4 inches in diameter. And the testimony said that they put the noodles, or the pool noodles, onto the support posts. The images are clear. There appear to be bungees, 2 bungees holding the pool noodles on the post, and some duct tape, which appears to have disintegrated, that was at one point holding the pool noodles together.
And that protected, I guess, the post. Was there anything that protected or cushioned the base?
The base, you mean the landing platform?
Platform, yes.
There's nothing on the landing platform. It's sharp wooden edges of posts and the retaining wall itself.
I guess this next question I'm going to try to understand from you, from your understanding of the case, what the
can I at this point, can you show us the picture that you're talking about with the sharp edged posts?
I cannot. However, Mr. Phillips may be able to share an image.
Yeah, sure. We'll get into, you know, certainly you've got cross-examination, but we can get into some of the photos shortly. I plan to, just for a sec. So what, I guess what was I'm trying to explain to the jury kind of what the intended design by Camp Shannon was, the intended operation. How was it supposed to work?
Objection to form. Go ahead.
Without
Let
knowing,
me re-ask the question. Based upon your understanding of and review of the facts, how was the Zipline supposed to work on the day that Mr. Robinson encountered it?
according to the evidence and testimony, the Mr. Robinson was supposed to have been attached to the zipline by one of the instructors, and then descend the zipline and step off at the end. The intended purpose being ride the zipline from the start to the finish.
And what happened instead?
The testimony says that he was not put on correctly. Zoc testified that the attachment, the tether between Mr. Robinson and the zipline was too long. So when he let go of the handles, he dropped too far, which put him in line with the landing platform, which was the obstruction that he hit at the end.
Okay. And you're not a medical doctor, are you?
I am not.
But what's the basic understanding, your basic understanding of the injuries Mr. Robinson sustained?
Apparently he turned backward and then hit his back. I don't know the injuries. I do know that he hit the landing platform, and then there's pictures of him on a gurney being taken to an ambulance.
Okay. The strap, and the length of the strap. Tell us about that. In this particular case, what are you talking about?
So we would call it a safety tether, and that strap attaches the person from their harness. Appears he was wearing a climbing harness of some sort, or a sit harness, or a seat harness, which is kind of below the waist, to the trolley or whatever it was on the zipline cable that allowed him to slide down the cable. So that tether, when designing ziplines, it should be of a length that prevents a couple of things. One, prevents the rider hitting an obstruction, and two, prevents them getting too close to the zipline cable where they could also sustain an injury.
Did Mr. Robinson lose his grip, or what happened?
According to tests,
Good.
According to testimony, he lost his grip on the handlebars on the way down, and then the safety strap prevented him from falling, which is the purpose. So he fell to the end of the strap, and then he was so low that he hit the obstruction, which was the retaining wall of the landing platform.
Okay. And then there was, you talked about here that there was, the need for active stopping. How is that supposed to work in this instance?
Okay. So there's supposed to be passive braking. And in this case, it was active braking, meaning it relied on humans. The images and the testimony show that there's a rope thrown over the top. They say a rappel rope thrown over the top of the cable. That rappel rope, the purpose of that rappel rope being held on either end by a human, so one person on either end of the rope, that was supposed to slow the rider down by capturing the trolley or the pulley on the zipline cable, so that they arrested the speed of the rider by that means.
Let's do this. Bear with me. Share screen, photographs. Can you see photographs?
Yes.
Okay. What I'd like to do is see if I can give you I'll just do it piecemeal. So have you seen this photograph
I have.
before? What is this?
This is the leading edge of the arrival platform, showing the retaining wall wooden structure.
Okay.
And
So is this what would have been what Mr. Robinson faced as he descended the zip line?
yes, as correct. As a rider comes in on the arrival end of the zip line, that is what they see. At the termination end, the leading edge, what I mean by leading edge is the front of the arrival platform, which is what we're looking at. We're looking at it from the side, so the rider would see it coming in from the left, and then they'd face it from the left.
And we've got two photos here. What's the significance of what are these?
On the right-hand image, you can see the departure tower, which is at the far end of the other side of the pond. The departure tower has a post in the middle, and attached to the post is the start of the zipline cable. And then you can see that then comes across the pond, over the top of the pond, and is attached to one of the arrival posts. So the support posts at the arrival end of the zip line, of which there are two. And you can see the first one on the left has a chain dangling down, and that's attached to the cable. And then to the right is a second post, and that appears to be a secondary or a backup post to keep the first support post from being pulled over by the cable.
Okay. And there's something green on the post. What is that?
Yeah, the green, you can see the bottom third of the post is the pool noodles.
I've got two more pictures. What are depicted in these?
On the left is the first support post at the arrival end of the zip line. We're now looking at an angle that is about, if we were at 6 o'clock on the previous image, we're now looking at this post from about 10 o'clock. And we're looking at the support post of the termination with the pool noodles, the aqua colored greenish pool noodles. There appears to be, we can see the chain which attaches to the support post to the cable. There's also a thing we call a turnbuckle, which is between the chain and the cable. There's quite a lot of detail on the cable itself and how it was built. That's fairly standard. The turnbuckle, which adjusts the tension of the cable to some extent. And then there's cable clamps where the cable is doubled back on itself and attached with these little saddles, metal saddles, basically, to put great friction and grip the cable to itself so that it can be terminated or attached appropriately. There's a third rope we don't know exactly what that's for, but there is a rope which could be part of the braking system. We don't know. And that is attached back to the termination post or support post. On the left of the left image is the arrival platform that we saw earlier.
Okay. Have you seen these photos before?
Yes.
What are they?
The left image shows the arrival platform at the edge of the pond. We can see a little bit of the arrival cable. It's kind of hard to see in this image,
Right.
but we can see the rope that was attached to the cable.
What about these?
Left image is the arrival platform from the other side that we were looking at previously. And we can see the cable in the top of the image and the white rope attached to it. They can see the arrival platform. It's unclear in this image if it was at this point a cutoff on the leading edge. It appears that it may not have been. So this may have been at another time. The right image shows the departure tower or the rappel tower to which they later attached this zip line, according to testimony.
What about here? What is this?
The left side image shows the departure tower, and you can see the zip line from the vertical post in the middle descending off to the right.
So Mr. Robinson would have started at on top of this tower on the left-hand side.
That is correct. He would have ascended the tower and then been attached to the zipline cable. And then he was told to sit on the edge and scoot off to start the zipline.
Okay. There was some discussion about sharp edges. Do these photos show it, or do I need to? Are there more photos? I know there's more photos, but
It
can you
does.
describe what?
It does. The left image shows the arrival platform and retaining wall. You did have an image that was zoomed in more, so you could see more of it earlier.
Right there. Is that what you're referring to?
That is what I'm referring to. Now, just to be clear, because I did not do a site visit, I am, based on my knowledge as an expert and an engineer, I'm saying they're sharp edges because I know what happens to wood when you cut it with a saw, which is appears to what had happened. But I did not measure them. So without actually being there, my assumption and knowledge as an expert leads me to believe that those are sharp edges. And they're certainly hard edges because wood is very hard.
We've gone an hour. Let's take about a 5-minute break and let the court reporter let her fingers relax for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will resume at 11:10, and I will finish up.
The time is 10:59 a.m. We're now going off the record. The time is 11:09 a.m. We're now back on the record.
Mr. Adamson, I want to kind of boil this down related to kind of your understanding of after review of the evidence in this case. Are you aware of any evidence that the Hunt Club instructed Robinson on what to do if he lost his grip?
The evidence and testimony does not indicate that they provided any sort of notice regarding what to do in the event that he lost his grip on the handlebars.
Are you aware? Sorry, go ahead.
This is a failure of the standard of care because they failed to warn him that by losing his grip, he could drop low enough that he could hit the landing platform.
That was my next question. Are you aware of any warning or instruction that was given to Mr. Robinson about the ability or likelihood or even possibility of striking the landing platform or colliding with the landing platform?
Based on the testimony and the evidence provided, there was the Hunt Club failed to warn Robinson that he could hit the landing platform. They also failed to instruct Robinson on what to do if he lost his grip on the Zipline handlebars.
From your review of the evidence, did the Zipline braking system meet the industry standards, and why not?
The Zipline braking system was an improper guard because it failed to arrest Robinson's speed before he reached the landing platform. It was not a passive braking system. It wasn't a braking system. Failed the basic criteria for the standards and for the standard of care.
I guess, secondary fall prevention measures. So you're holding on, and then you let go or you lose grip, and you're caught by the harness or the strap, as we've talked about. Was there a defect in that design?
The strap was too long, and that created a dangerous condition because it exposed Robinson to a collision with the landing platform while on the zipline.
Okay. And was the landing platform itself in a proper and safe location, given the design of the zipline?
The landing platform was an obstruction, and it was an obstruction in the landing zone. The location was appropriate for a landing platform, but the design of the platform created the hazard and the obstruction, which became a dangerous condition when they put Robinson on the zipline.
Okay. So, are all your opinions today to a reasonable degree of scientific probability or certainty?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And to boil it down, you've given us your opinions in this case, the four opinions. Could you restate those, please?
Sure. And if I may, I'm going to, for the benefit of the jury, explain what danger is. It's important to understand this in terms of my opinions.
Let me stop you so I can clean that up. We can cut and, this movie production here. What is danger as a concept?
So danger is the combination of a hazard, and a hazard is the ability to cause harm, and risk, which is the likelihood of exposure to that hazard. So when and where possible, a hazard should be eliminated. When it's impractical to eliminate a hazard, it should be guarded against or warned about. And the reason I'm saying this is because the failures of the Hunt Club were related to the danger that they created, the dangerous condition, more accurately.
Let me back up and ask that question. So you talk generally about what danger is. What dangers or hazards did the Hunt Club have that are outside the protocols of safe, reasonable zipline standards?
Sure. So this is where I will go to my opinions. The failure of the Hunt Club to provide a landing zone free from obstructions, their failure to provide a strap short enough to prevent Robinson hitting the landing platform, their failure to use a proper zipline braking system, their failure to warn Robinson that he could hit the platform if he lost his grip on the handlebar, their failure to properly instruct Robinson of this hazard was improper, violated the industry standard of care, and created the dangerous condition that caused Robinson to collide with the landing platform and become injured.
You said 4 opinions. You just gave 6. Could you, are they part of the same thing, or could you go through them one more time?
Sure. The failure of the Hunt Club to provide a landing zone free from obstructions, their failure to provide a strap short enough to prevent Robinson hitting the landing platform,
okay,
their failure to use a proper zipline braking system, their failure to warn Robinson that he could hit the platform if he lost his grip on the zipline handlebar, and their failure to properly instruct Robinson of this hazard was improper. It violated the industry standard of care and created the dangerous condition that caused Robinson to collide with the landing platform and become injured.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Okay. Okay, let's first off, did you ever see the harness or the connecting device they put on the wire?
There's no images that show it close up.
So, to your knowledge, everything is based upon hypothesis that the strap was too long and that the harness was improper, but you've never actually seen it or measured it.
That's not a hypothesis. That's in the testimony. That's evidence.
Okay, so you're using somebody else's opinion, who is a layperson, to determine that the strap was too long or that it was improperly put on.
I am not.
What are you using?
The testimony, which is the evidence.
The testimony of who?
The testimony of Joseph Shannon, Thomas Zock, and Robert Robinson.
Okay, and what exactly from their testimony are you using to determine the strap was too long?
So if you let me pull it up exactly.
Are you looking at things, sir?
I am indeed. I'm looking at the testimony.
You're not allowed to look at things while you're testifying in court. You have to do this from memory, sir. The only thing you're allowed to look at are the things we show you.
I'll object. I mean, he can he would be allowed to review his report and refresh his recollection, but we would need to know that that's what he's doing. So if to the extent he's refreshing his recollection, we would just need to know.
He's not allowed to read everything. He's just allowed to, he's not allowed to read it from the thing. You can refresh your recollection, but then you have to speak from your head, not from reading it off the paper.
Correct.
The testimony, and I don't recall exactly where in the testimony, is clear.
Of who?
Of the testifiers, those who testified.
Okay, let's break this down. What in Mr. Robinson's testimony did you determine that the strap was too long? What part of his testimony did you determine that?
He said that he dropped when he let go of the handlebars. He dropped down, okay. And the images provided that Counsel Phillips showed us show the setup, and without measuring the height of the various components, I was shown images. Images were provided to me showing someone on the zip line where they are approaching the platform.
I object this. You weren't shown any images today or talk about them of people on the zip line. The only one I see is the one that's in your background. You have photos that you were shown of somebody hanging from the zip line?
Yes, he does. I mean, is this a discovery deposition? Because you kind of had an opportunity for that. I mean, okay, you can answer about what other photos you've reviewed.
That's all I'm asking.
Sure. I was provided a set of photos, some of which Mr. Council Phillips showed us, including people on the zipline.
What people were on there? Do you know? Were they part of this case or just photos from the past?
There were photos provided by Mr. Phillips, the Council Phillips, at this location on this zipline.
Okay. And these people that were on the photos, how were they body type versus the pictures you saw of the people on the zipline versus Mr. Robinson? Were they bigger, smaller, younger, older? What?
No, I can't tell age from a photo. And their size, I do not have an opinion on that. That's not what that is not what I'm making an opinion on.
Okay. From those photos, did you determine how the straps were attached to the zip line?
I did not.
Okay. From those photos, did you determine how the braking systems that they were using worked?
It accurately represented the testimony for the braking system.
From the photos you saw, what lines were attached to the what exactly did you see? What equipment did you see?
The photos provided show the braking system with two people holding a rope that goes over the top of the zipline cable,
okay,
as described in the testimony.
Did you see a third rope that was attached to the actual trolley itself that went to the tower?
Third rope from the trolley to the tower, no.
Is it because there wasn't one or because you didn't notice it?
The photo doesn't show one.
Okay, so the photo that you saw of these people, which you don't know who they are or when they went across it, they didn't have it, but to your knowledge, you don't know whether or not there was one attached to Mr. Robinson at that time.
I do not.
Okay, I would like to, let's see, where's my, okay. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see this picture here?
I do.
Okay. Do you see this area here? You see the hole in the end of the trolley?
I do.
Isn't that a place where a rope could be attached?
It could be.
Okay. So if there was a rope attached to it that day, which you don't know one way or the other, if there was a rope attached to that and went up to the tower, wouldn't that also be an additional braking system?
Well, in your hypothesis, which is imagining what could possibly be there, of which there is no evidence, I will not opine. Counsel, please do not interrupt. I would like to finish. I would like to give a complete answer since you asked the question. Would you like me to do that?
Sure.
In your hypothesis, imagining what could have been there, that is not a basis for an expert opinion. So I can't provide an opinion on what you imagine might have been there.
Okay. Did you look at any other transcripts other than Mr. Robinson's, Mr. Zock's, Mr. Shannon's? Did you look at any other transcripts?
I only had the 3 deposition transcripts.
So then if there was transcripts that said that there was a rope attached to that somebody up on the tower was controlling that rope to keep him from going fast, then you would not be able to testify about that today, correct?
I am not going to imagine what may or may not have been in a hypothetical situation. That's not my job. I only work on facts.
So isn't the physics clear that if somebody was pulling on that rope, it would slow it down?
If someone pulled on a rope and provided an opposing force or any sort of force on the rope attached to anything, that is a force on that rope.
And that would slow it down.
You're asking me to imagine something that was not a fact, and I don't answer things that are not facts.
Okay,
There's no information that indicates that that was the case, which means I cannot make an opinion on what you imagine might have been there.
I'm going to proffer to you, which means I'm going to tell you that another witness testified that there was a rope attached and that they were holding onto it to slow it down. Does that change your opinion of whether or not this thing had another brake on it?
That, for me, that is not a fact. You're telling me something that is new evidence that I have not examined. Consequently, I will not make an opinion on it.
So you can't even simply state that an opposing force on that rope would slow it down, even minusculely.
Counsel, you're asking me to hypothesize on something of which there is no evidence that I have seen, and I will not make an opinion on imagined things that I do not know are facts. I can only opine on facts.
Is physics imaginary? You just testified to the physics on this. Is physics imaginary in your mind?
Objection.
Physics is not imaginary.
Okay, so if there was a line attached to that and was being pulled, would it or would it not slow down the harness or down the trolley?
It depends on the direction.
If it was being pulled from the tower and the person was going the opposite direction from the tower, would it slow it down?
In your hypothetical construction, of which I have seen no evidence, in that scenario, if that was the case, it may have.
Okay. Okay, you testified about this picture. Is there a slope in this line?
There is.
Would the slope be greater or less or about the same if Mr. Robinson was on this rope?
The slope of the line without a human on it, they're what we call tangential slopes. This is a curve. So a curve at any specific point will have a slope at that point only. With someone like Mr. Robinson on the line, at his position, the zipline cable is what we call it, behind him will have a slope and in front will have a slope.
Okay.
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that slope depends on the rider's position and their weight.
Okay. So as you're looking at this picture with nothing on it, in your opinion, would that slope be, or would that curve or slope, as you want to say, be greater or less with Mr. Robinson on it?
Counsel, that's an interesting question. Because a curve has infinite number of slopes, from horizontal at the middle of the bottom of the drape to the attachment points at the departure and arrival posts, it is theoretically would be an identical slope at some point on that line to the slope at which the line behind or in front of Mr. Robinson on the zip line would have been. Now, that's hard to understand unless you know the geometry of or catenary is what we call it, of a cable that is hanging by either end, because at any point on that line will have a unique slope. One of those slopes will theoretically match the slope of the line behind or in front, actually, and in front of a rider on that line.
Okay. So when you look at that slope, what you just told me, I believe, is that at the center of that drape, the slope behind is the same as the slope above or in front.
That's not what I said.
Okay. At the apex of the slope of this line right here, where it's closest to the ground, is the slope the same in the back as it is in the front?
Not necessarily.
Why would it not be if you just said that the slope is the same in the front and the back?
I didn't say that.
Okay, so looking at this picture, would the slope from the back be the same as the slope from the front?
On a curve, the slope depends on exactly where it is on that curve.
If the trolley's in the middle of that curve, is the slope in the front and the back the same?
Depends on the height of the departure and arrival posts and the terminations.
Did you measure that?
I did not.
So you don't know whether they're equal or different.
The height of the departure post and the height of the arrival posts are different. Consequently, the slope of the line will vary from the start to the finish, and it depends where the rider is on that line.
So as you sit here today, you don't know the height of the departure place where he pushed off the edge of the platform to where the platform was attached to the pole, to the pole on the landing pad. You don't know which was higher.
I do.
How do you know which was higher?
The images are clear, and the zipline descends from a high point to a low point, which is how a zipline works, and it's how someone gets speed, because as they descend, they pick up speed, which we discussed earlier when Councillor Phillips asked about Newton's laws of motion.
Okay, so are you saying that you saw a photograph from the side where you had the tower on one side and the landing pad on the other, and they were exactly straight on, so there was no angles that were, it didn't, it was perspective of the angle that you were looking at. Did you see one side to side where you could see the actual drape in it? Or are you saying that you saw one slightly at a skew and you judged the angles?
I didn't say that.
What are you saying?
You asked me if the start of the zipline tower was higher than the finish.
Right.
And I said it is.
How could you determine that without seeing the side from a side view?
There's multiple reasons that I can say this with scientific certainty.
Okay.
The photographic evidence is clear. That tower is clearly several times higher than a human. The images show that. The arrival post, there is someone on the line arriving on the arrival platform, crouching while they're on the line, clearly much lower than a tower that, I'm going to estimate this because it's a photograph, but I'm going to estimate that the height of a rappel tower, which is used because it's high, and a rappel tower, which is in the testimony, this was a rappel tower, and then they added the zip line. A rappel tower is generally several times higher than a human, which is why they use it as a tower and why it's called a tower. Towers are not short. And council, please don't interrupt me. I'm doing my professional job here, and I would request you do the same.
Don't talk to me like that, sir. We're looking at a tower. We're looking at a tower. Do you know the exact height of this tower in the photograph?
I do not.
Did you have the opportunity, or did you request to come out and measure this tower?
I did not.
Did you ask to have somebody else go out and measure this tower for you?
I did not.
Okay. Now, did you ask somebody to measure the landing pad from the base of this tower in comparison to the height of the pad? Was there any kind of measurements done?
They were not.
Okay. And did you ask to come out and see that landing pad?
I did not.
Did you have somebody else go out and look at the landing pad?
I did not.
Did you have anybody come out and make measurements of the landing pad?
I did not. And before I continue answering your questions, I would like to complete my answer, which you interrupted.
What answer is that?
You asked me how I knew that the tower at the start was taller than the tower at the finish, or the termination was lower than the start. So I shall continue with my answer. The fact that this is a zip line, the fact that Mr. Robinson attain speed on the zip line. And using Newton's laws, plus the photographic evidence, plus the testimony, clearly indicates the departure tower is taller than the arrival tower or the arrival platform.
Okay. Are you finished, sir?
I am.
How fast was he going across the line?
I do not know.
Okay. When you look at this photograph that I'm showing you, and it has a bait stamp of number 22, how high is the line from the ground at the bottom of the curve?
I do not know.
So Mr. Robinson would have been hanging underneath that, correct?
That is correct.
And he would have also have had the harness, which actually made him lower, correct?
The
Well, if he's hanging from underneath it on a harness, it would make him lower to the ground than at the apex of that curve.
Yes, he's below the cable, and
Okay.
he's not attached to the cable with a harness. He's attached to the cable with a tether, which you showed the picture of, the harness to the tether to the cable.
Okay,
via a
so
trolley.
so it's easy. I'm just trying to find out, is he below that apex?
Well, he would be below the apex, considerably below the apex, because the catenary, the drape or the curve for the cable, is no longer a curve created by gravity of the cable. It's now a different shape because of the weight of the rider attached to the cable.
So once the rider went down on that cable, the apex of that curve would be lower to the ground.
It would not be an apex.
Okay, at the center of that curve that you see in front of you, he would be closer to the ground because he put his weight on it.
Yeah, it would no longer be a curve, and he would be lower.
Okay, it would actually turn into almost like a V.
A close approximation, yes.
Okay, so there would be an up and a down on both behind him and in front of him.
Is that a question, counsel?
Yes. Would there be an up and a down behind him and an up and a down behind it, in front of him?
If I may interpret the question, you're asking, would the cable ascend behind him and in front of him?
Correct.
At the middle of a cable, yes, that is generally the case.
Okay, so you talked about passive brakes, passive braking systems. If he was going up a slope on this attached to the zip line on a trolley going uphill, that's what's considered in your industry as a passive brake, correct?
If someone goes uphill on a cable, it's called a gravity brake, which is a form of a passive brake.
Okay. But yet you testified that there was no passive brakes, but yet clearly there is.
We don't know.
Well, we do know physically that if he's on that line and there's a developed V in the line, he would be going uphill going forward, correct?
No.
No. So if he's at the bottom of that V and moving, is there resistance created by the shape of the direction of the line?
It's possible.
Possible, or I thought physics were pretty clear. In physics, if you're hanging on that line and it turns into a V, as you said, there would be an upward slope. Would that be a resistance that would act as a passive brake?
If there's an upward slope, which to your point is actually likely, not measured, but likely, then there would be some level of, there would be some level of resistance.
Okay. Okay, you talked about the different kinds of zip lines, all different kinds of designs. Is it your opinion that somebody who goes down one zip line should be able to, without any kind of safety brief or anything else, go down another one without knowing how is designed?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Council. You're asking about.
You have the zip line behind you, okay, in your picture behind you. That's different from the type of zip line that I have as number 22, right?
Oh, the zip line in my picture.
Yes.
Fundamentally the same thing.
But they are different.
They are different zip lines.
Okay, and because the length, the distance that you're traveling also changes everything, doesn't it?
Well, describe everything. That's a pretty broad statement.
If the distance between the starting point and the landing point is much longer than another one, that would change the whole physics of it. Isn't it true?
The physics changes on the length of the zip line. This is correct, or the zip line cable.
Okay. So is it your opinion that if you've never been on this zip line before, that you should attend a safety brief? I believe you testified to that.
Correct.
Okay. And is it dangerous to get on this line without a safety check or safety brief?
On this line, this zip line, in this instance,
yes,
it did create a dangerous condition for exactly the reason that I testified, which is that failing to tell someone that they can hit an obstruction on the zip line, along the zip line cable, creates a dangerous condition.
Okay, when you get on a dangerous, as you said, dangerous, or if you do a dangerous activity like this, is it better to be rushing, slow and careful? Which is better?
Well, first of all, I didn't say this was a dangerous activity. I said that there was a dangerous condition created.
Okay.
And your question, as I understand it, is about the human and how they approach the zip line. That is not part of my opinion.
Okay. So, in you personally have gone up and down zip lines, right?
Well, I've gone down zip lines.
Zip down. Okay, gone down. In your experience, were you slow and steady, or did you just, it's no problem, click on and go? What did you do?
I have been on many zip lines since the 1980s.
Okay.
And I have approached them in all manners, depending on what that zip line is, what the supervision provided is, what the equipment looks like. There's many dependencies, so there is no one answer. It depends on the zip line.
Okay, let me ask you this. You walk out here for the first time and see this particular zip line. You climb up that ladder and get on that platform. In your opinion, would you personally be careful, or would you just hook on and go?
So you're asking me about what I do as a person, not
you as an expert.
As an expert, okay. As an expert, knowing a great deal about zip lines, I will examine most of the facets of the zip line.
Okay.
So in my profession as a zip line expert, I take a great amount of time to examine the zip line and the structures, the brake system, the slope, the length, everything involved in the zip line, because it's my profession.
Okay. Would you go up onto this tower and connect to that without having a safety brief based on what you see?
As an expert in the field, knowing more than most people in the field, I would examine it and evaluate whether or not it was a risk or a hazard.
Okay. Are you familiar with what a Army jump master is?
I am not exactly sure what an Army jump master is.
Have you ever seen people parachute?
I have.
Okay. Have you ever seen people prepare to jump
Are you asking prepare to jump
out of a plane?
out of a plane?
Yeah. Either by video or in person.
I have.
Okay. What's the last thing that everybody does before they go out of a plane?
Objection.
Counsel, I can't answer that question. Observing a video is not the same as knowing what people do when they jump out of a plane. And I fail to see how this is related to a zip line.
So when somebody puts on a harness to attach themselves to a parachute, is it important to look and make sure it's put on right?
Objection.
I'm not and did not examine parachuting and harnesses, so I can't provide an opinion on that.
Okay. So in this instance with the harness I showed you and this zip line, would it be important to check the harness to make sure it was on correctly and the lanyard make sure it was attached correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And if you as an expert, if I just handed you the harness and the attachment and sent you up on this tower, would you know how to connect it properly?
As an expert, and most experts, I'd say all experts in zipline cases, they would know how to use the equipment.
People that are used to using equipment like this.
Is that a question?
Yes.
Can you state it as a question, please?
Sure. If your job entitled, required you to use harnesses and connections and stuff like that, would they be able to use the same confidence that you would have going up there?
Objection.
The person supervising the equipment, the personal safety equipment, which is what it's called in these cases, would need to know how they're used properly for a zip line.
Okay. Now, with you as an expert, would you go up on this tower with no safety person there to look at your equipment? Would you go up there without having somebody up there to look at your equipment?
Well, I am a safety expert.
Okay, but
and I do work with this equipment.
Okay.
So yes, as a safety expert who instructs other people, of course I would.
So you would go off of this without having somebody check your equipment?
As an expert who checks other people's equipment and does this as a profession, yes, I would be very confident to check my own equipment.
Okay, so then somebody else who's competent in checking other people's equipment should also have the same confidence.
Objection.
Okay, so if I understand, let me paraphrase the question so I understand that I'm answering it correctly. You're saying if a person who is familiar with and an expert with personal safety equipment for a zip line is at the start of a zip line with that equipment, they should be able to check themselves. This is correct.
Okay. Now let me ask you this. Hypothetically, if you're the expert on zip lining, if you went up in a plane to go parachuting, would you trust yourself to check your equipment, or would you ask somebody else who knows about it to check your equipment?
Objection.
Interesting question. Although we're not talking about airplanes and parachuting, it would completely depend on my level of expertise as someone jumping out of airplanes with parachutes.
Okay, let's say you jumped out of an airplane one time, just once. Would you trust yourself to be able to check your own gear, or would you have somebody else who's an expert do it for you before you stepped off that plane?
Objection.
Go ahead, you can answer.
It would depend on my level of training.
You've only gone down it once.
Objection.
You only jumped off once.
Okay, it would still depend on the level of training.
So if you had a low level of training, would you do it?
Objection.
Define low level.
Basically how to put the harness on and jump out of a plane, not any of the real aspects related to the physics involved or all the dangers involved. Just basically, you've been trained to just put the equipment on your back, you get on a plane, and they tell you to step out and you pull it that. Would you do that without having somebody else check it?
Sorry, objection.
Well, counsel, I'm finding this line of questioning quite unusual because we're not talking about jumping out of airplanes with parachutes.
I realize that. And so does everybody else here. This is just a question I have. You can answer it.
Objection.
Should I have not had sufficient training, should I not be familiar with the equipment, I would be unlikely to trust myself to do something like this. Should that be the case in this, in your example of parachutes and airplanes?
Okay. If there was a safety briefing on how to use the equipment to go off this tower, should you have attended it if you've never been off it before?
Objection.
If a safety briefing is provided, then one should be at the safety briefing.
And if you refuse to go to the safety briefing because you're an expert, whose fault is it if you don't put it on right?
Objection.
Supervision requires many things, counsel. Although you're providing a hypothetical situation with hypothetical ideas and imagining things that could or couldn't have happened, which I'm not opining on, in your hypothetical example, should I, as an expert, knowing the equipment, decide to bypass a safety briefing, that would be my responsibility. But as I'm emphasizing, this hypothetical and imagined situation are not the facts that we're talking about in this case. So I cannot provide opinions related to your line of questioning regarding this case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, in your experience and your training, are the ways of connecting onto the zip line with the harnesses and stuff different from place to place from different zip lines?
Each zip line in each location may or may not have similar or different equipment. There is a large range of equipment available for zip lines. We call this personal safety equipment, as I said. So the personal safety equipment means the harness, the tether, carabiners, trolleys, pulleys, this kind of thing. And it does vary across the zipline industry and the use and what's available for purchase.
Okay, if you went to a zip line and they had equipment you were not used to seeing, would you request help installing it properly?
Objection.
When you say installing, what do you mean exactly?
Putting it on. Connecting it to the zip line, putting it on your body, attaching all the attachments correctly. Would you ask for assistance?
So should I, as an expert?
With equipment you're not familiar with?
Objection.
If there's equipment that I'm not familiar with as an expert in the zipline industry, well, I'd be surprised. However, if that was the case and it was new equipment to me, I would want to understand, at a minimum, examine the equipment. Of course, you're asking someone who has not just a lot of experience in the industry, but has also designed and built these things. So your question to me about my specific knowledge and experience and how I approach it does not seem relevant to this case.
Okay, let's try a different way. The average person who's never seen this type of equipment, do you think it's necessary for somebody to tell them how to put it on or show them how to put it on or train them to put it on?
Supervision is required for amusement attractions like ziplines.
Okay, and supervision has to be, if it's offered, you have to at least agree to be supervised, don't you? Isn't there some
The-
cooperation involved?
You're asking me about human factors now. I'm not a human factors expert. I am a zipline expert. I can't imagine what people do or how they interact with other people. So that is an opinion I cannot make.
Okay, let me ask you this. You're up on this tower. You've been through the training on how the tower operates, how the equipment goes on. Somebody comes up in front of you and they connect to this thing and you see they've done it wrong. Would you tell them?
As a zipline expert, if I see something that looks like it could create a dangerous condition, I absolutely would tell them.
Do you think that there's a duty to tell them?
Duty sounds to me like you're implying some sort of legal requirement, and I am not a legal expert or a lawyer. So ignoring that implication, there is no stated duty of a human to interact. It's an interesting question because, again, this is outside my area of expertise and is not what I'm making opinions on in this case. I'm making opinions on the zipline, the safety, supervision, the things that I have told you several times now are my opinions.
Okay. Is there a difference between, have you ever seen military style zip lines?
I have.
Okay. And what is the basic difference between a military zip line and a commercial entertainment zip line?
Military zip lines are used for a different purpose to commercial or consumer zip lines.
Well, what's the physical difference? Are there different
on a fundamental level? They're similar. They meet the definition of a zip line.
Okay. Do they use different wires?
It depends on the zip line. There's a variety of cables that can be used for zip lines. It depends on the length, the tension, the purpose. I have not well, you're asking a very general question about a huge range of possibilities. So I cannot give an answer generally about whether or not the cables are the same because there are many cables available.
Okay. Are the harnesses the same? Or are they close to the same? Are they the same type or are they completely different?
The purpose of a harness is to keep someone secure when attached to something. There's many types of harnesses, military, civilian, for climbing, zip lines or other. So on a fundamental level, there are similarities about keeping a human secure as personal safety equipment. But asking the question whether they're the same, there are many harnesses available of many styles. From seat harnesses to seat harnesses to full body harnesses, there are many. Now, what people use on specific zip lines or what specific zip lines use is up to them. And the general question can be answered in terms of it varies, depends on the zip line, depends on the purpose.
Okay, you testified about the issue of weight for the person going across the zip line, that would change the amount of friction on the line. Is that correct?
I did not say that.
Okay, so is weight on the line a variable? In safety, as it relates to safety.
As it relates to safety.
Yes. Will you go faster or slower if you're heavier or lighter?
In general, a heavier rider will go quicker, but it does depend on their shape.
The shape of the person themselves?
Correct.
So would a smaller, like the size of a child, go faster or slower than a grown-up?
It depends on their shape. In general, a lighter, smaller person will go slower.
Why?
It's because of resistance.
Okay. So you're saying that the lower the resistance, the slower you go?
No.
So wouldn't it wouldn't a bigger person who causes more resistance go slower than a smaller person?
No,
Why?
a bigger person doesn't create more resistance necessarily. It depends on their shape, as I said.
Have you seen a picture of Mr. Robinson
I have, at least on a gurney.
on a gurney? So you don't know what he actually looks like standing up
I
without.
do not.
Okay.
I know
So
what he
you-
looks like lying down.
Okay. So you can't really give an opinion on his shape as it would either contribute or how it would affect the going down the zip line.
I am not giving an opinion on that.
Okay.
Excuse me, counselor. I'm very sorry to interrupt this, the videographer. If there's a good time to go off record in the next 5-10 minutes, we try to keep our media units down to 2 hours.
Okay.
Counsel, if I may give a complete answer
Go ahead.
to your early question, I understand if
You got to tell me the question because you said
you're
it
asking about speed and shape and weight of a
Okay.
rider.
Okay.
In order to give a complete answer, which I did answer earlier with Counsel Phillips, in general, a rider that is heavier, depending on the shape, will go faster than a lighter rider. Now, the shape is important because you could have a very tall, thin person who weighs quite a lot, but they present a very large area, surface area to the wind, and consequently, the resistance or the sum of the forces that resist their movement can be. So in general, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking, does a heavier person who doesn't present much resistance move quicker? And yes, of course they do, because that person is heavier. And then the forces of movement down the line are greater than the resisting forces proportionally. A smaller, lighter person or object going down a line has less relative resistance on the line with the wind and the line, etc., than a larger person presenting a relatively less surface area to their weight. Now, it's sort of, to make it very simple, a heavier object doesn't fall faster than a lighter object unless the relative amount of resistance is less, which in general, I think this was your question, in general, does a bigger person go faster than a smaller person? In general, yes, this is the case.
Okay. And okay, are you finished?
I am.
Okay. So that would also flip around. A bigger person would slow down more going uphill, going up. Once they got that apex and started going up, they would slow down faster than a lighter person.
Actually, that's not the case.
Why is that?
Because as you slow down, your resistance is less. In fact, a heavier person will continue further up the line because as they slow down, the resistance also drops. And this is not linear, meaning it's not a direct relationship. As you slow down, the resistance, which is largely wind resistance at these speeds, it diminishes to the point where it's a relatively small amount of resistance, which is why these riders, especially when there's gravity braking involved. And to answer your question, yes, there was a little bit of appears. We didn't measure it, but it's likely, based on the photographic evidence, that there was some level of gravity braking. But this depends on the height of the start and the end terminations of the cable. Whether or not there was, even if it's likely, because the rider slows down toward the end, the resistance drops dramatically, which means that the effect of gravity and the forces slowing them down diminish as they get toward the end. Consequently, heavier riders tend to go much faster up in gravity braking than lighter riders. It just makes it worse for a heavier rider, which makes it all the more important to have the passive, and let's be clear on this, it's a passive integrated braking system that the standards require. The integrated part is very important. In this case, there was none. It was an active braking system, with some gravity braking that may or may not have had any effect on slowing a rider down to the point where the presentation of the dangerous condition with the landing platform would have any effect on the rider coming in. In fact, the evidence is clear. Mr. Robinson came in at such a speed and at such a height off the cable that the dangerous condition created caused him to hit the platform. Whether or not there was gravity braking, whether or not he slowed down any, it just doesn't matter. He came in at sufficient speed, at a sufficient position and height from the cable where he hit the landing platform.
Okay. Did you do any measurements that would show that if Mr. Robinson, if he had the equipment on properly, would not have hit that platform? Is there any measurements done?
I did no measurements, and I didn't ask for any measurements because it was unnecessary. He hit the platform.
Well, if he had the equipment on wrong and he was lower than he was supposed to be, wouldn't that cause him to hit the platform?
That is correct. That's actually one of my opinions.
Okay.
It was set up incorrectly for whatever reason. Lack of supervision, improper equipment, improper guards. I mean, they were all failures of the Hunt Club to set it up properly.
Excuse me, Counselor. Is it okay if we just go off record for a second?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. The time is 12:06 p.m. We're now going off the record. The time is 12:06 p.m. We're now back on the record.
So the braking system that they had on the landing pad, did anybody give you any information related to how it was actually supposed to operate? Or
Yes.
did you just look at the picture? Who told you?
I read the testimony.
Testimony of who?
Thomas Zock,
Okay.
Joseph Shannon, and Robert Robinson.
Robert Robinson gave you testimony on how the brakes worked?
Robert Robinson didn't give me testimony. I read the transcript of his deposition.
Okay. So when you say that there were sharp edges on the platform, you don't know that for sure. You're just guessing that there could be, not that there were.
It's not a guess. This is my expert opinion.
Okay, so did Mr. Robinson get stabbed by anything?
I have not seen that in the evidence.
Okay, so the relevancy of the wood cut the way you said it was cut, that really does not factor into this case. He wasn't injured by those.
Is that a statement or a question, counsel?
It's a question. Was he injured by the wood that you said was cut at an angle?
Mr. Robinson was injured because the landing platform was inadequate and presented a hazard, a dangerous condition, because it was an obstruction in the landing zone. And a landing platform that is of the incorrect shape is also an obstruction. Landing platforms, and this is what they created, was a ramp, basically, a very steep ramp. Landing platforms and zip lines are generally designed as ramps to eliminate or significantly reduce the risk of a rider arriving at the landing platform from hitting a sharp edge.
So in this case, did Mr. Robinson get injured by the sharp points that you're talking about on those posts?
The evidence says he collided with the landing platform. So he hit the edge of this platform.
But he did not hit the posts that had the sharp points that you talked about.
We don't know exactly what he hit. but we do know he hit the landing platform, and this is part of the landing platform.
The pool noodles that are on the pole, did he get injured by those?
The evidence suggests he hit the landing platform and didn't go past the edge of the landing platform significantly.
So then the pole did not factor into his injuries that he received.
That's what the evidence suggests.
Okay.
Counsel, if I may, to answer your question
No,
fully.
there's no question. There's no question in front of you.
The previous question, counsel.
There's no question in front of you, sir. You don't get to just talk. You got to answer my question at this point.
I would like to fully answer your
No, I
previous
don't
question.
want you to, sir. You answered your question. You stopped talking. There's no question before you, sir. You don't get to answer or you don't get to say anything else until I ask you another question.
Counsel, would you like me to give a full answer to your previous question, or would you just want a partial answer?
As far as I'm concerned, you gave me a full answer.
I did not.
You did. You answered exactly what I asked you. Don't argue with me. That's the way this works.
Counsel, my job as a legal forensic expert.
I'm going to ask the court at this point to strike this speech by the defendant or by the witness because he's not following instructions. He's not following courtroom decorum. He's not allowed to answer or just talk and speak as he wishes. If he failed to answer something or say something that he now thought he should have, he doesn't get to just intervene and say it now. He's required to listen to a question and answer it. He's failing to do that, and I asked the court to strike anything to this effect that he says at this point.
Counsel, you asked me not to give complete questions.
No, I'm asking you to give me a complete question when I ask it for you. And then when I move on, you're done with that question. You move on to another question.
Well, I'm not done giving the answer.
You were done giving the answer. Stop arguing. You'll find another way to get it in. Just wait, okay? Okay. The brakes that were used, the three ropes that were used as a braking system, one from the tower, two on the landing pad, if they were properly applied, would they have slowed down the rider, Mr. Robinson?
Counsel, you introduced a third thing, a rope from the tower, of which there is no evidence.
There is evidence, but you haven't gotten it. Okay, let's exclude the tower rope. The two ropes that were used as a braking system, are you saying they have zero effect on slowing people down?
I didn't say that.
What effect would they have?
We have no evidence to suggest it was an effective brake. In fact, the evidence suggests it was an ineffective brake.
Okay, so hypothetically, this would be the scenario. The fact that they didn't work would also be consistent with somebody dropping the lines and jumping out of the way, not using the brake at all. Would that be consistent with the injuries and the fact that he hit the platform?
There's no way to determine a relationship between an active braking mechanism and people who operate it and injury. And I am not making an opinion on injury. I cannot. That's not my area of expertise, and I'm not doing that.
So let me ask you a different way. Would it make a difference if those ropes were applied or not applied?
I think by saying applied, in this case, you're saying had the people holding the brake ropes or the rope that was draped over the top of the cable, maybe I should ask the question back to you because I don't quite understand your question. You're saying, please ask the question again. It's unclear from your question to me.
Object.
Let's try a different way. Would these brakes slow the person down if they were properly applied by the people handling the ropes? No matter how much it would slow them down, would it slow them down at all?
Well, counsel, I have not examined this brake because there was no need to because it failed.
Okay, so if the failure was caused by somebody not applying the brakes, that doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that it wasn't applied. Is that correct?
Objection.
You're asking a lot of hypotheticals. The facts are that the braking system was inadequate. It was not part of an integrated passive braking system, and it contributed to the dangerous condition because it was an inadequate guard. This guard was improper. It failed to arrest Robertson's speed before he reached the landing platform. They're the facts.
Okay, now answer my question. Would it have slowed him down if it was applied?
We don't know.
So we don't know whether it would have worked or not worked.
Correct.
Okay. So the only evidence you looked at in this case was the transcripts of Mr. Zock, Judy Witt, and Mr. Robinson. In those three transcripts that you looked at, did anybody mention that there was a safety meeting?
That's not the only evidence I have.
What other evidence do you have?
I have the complaint.
Okay.
I have the photos.
Okay. Out of the transcripts, let's just look at the transcripts. Did anybody in any of those transcripts mention that there was a safety briefing?
I don't recall if there was a safety briefing or not.
Do you recall if any of the evidence presented to you said that there was a safety safety meeting that Mr. Robinson refused to attend?
Objection.
I do not recall
Okay.
if he refused to attend anything or not, or if he was given the opportunity.
Okay. Now, the secondary fall system, which is the tether, correct?
Not correct.
Okay. What is the tether called that attaches them to somebody to the trolley?
So that's the safety. In this case, the safety tether that attaches the rider's harness to the Zipline trolley. I believe in this instance a pulley.
Okay. And what's the purpose of that line?
The purpose of the safety tether is to prevent the rider from falling off the zipline or falling too far from the zipline.
You mean dropping too low below it?
Yes, that is correct.
So if it's improperly put on or it breaks or something like that, then somebody would fall lower than they should.
If it's the wrong length, or if it's, there's many reasons it may or may not be correctly set up, but it must be set up correctly.
Okay. And if it's not set up correctly, would that be a significant issue of how somebody would get injured?
That is correct. There's many ways it could be set up incorrectly, all of which may present a hazard, maybe even create a dangerous condition.
Okay. Okay. You say that the Hunt Club failed to warn Mr. Robinson of the possibility of danger. Is that correct?
I said that the Hunt Club failed to warn Robertson that he could hit the landing platform if he lost his grip on the handlebars.
Okay, so if he refused to go to the safety briefing and then went up there anyway, would that be his own fault for not going to the safety briefing where they would explain that?
Objection.
I can't make an opinion on what someone may or may not have done if there was or wasn't a safety briefing. It's not my opinion.
When you say there was a failure of instruction, doesn't somebody have to be present for the instruction for there to be instruction?
Objection.
What I said was the Hunt Club failed to instruct Robertson.
Okay, and if he refused that instruction, does that change anything?
I'm not going to make an opinion on a hypothetical situation that I don't know about.
So please describe the scientific method you used to make your calculations on whether or not he was going too fast, whether the braking system failed to work, the whole scientific process you used.
Objection.
I did not make calculations. I'm using the evidence provided as an expert.
So you're just using the evidence you see in pictures and the testimony of the three transcripts you were given.
This is correct. And my knowledge as an expert.
Okay. I have nothing further. Ms. Stevens, do you have anything?
I just have one question. In your research, what percentage of the zip lines have the active brake system and what percentage have the passive brake system?
I haven't done research on percentages.
Have you done research on injuries on zip lines?
I haven't researched that subject.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Adamson, I have a few follow-up. This is Florida. So let's use one of those multi-level pool slides as an example.
You'll have to explain what a pool slide is. I don't know what that is, Mr. Phillips.
Certainly. You go to whether it's Disney World or any kind of water park, there's a multi-level slide that takes somebody from a platform down into a swimming pool. Mr. Adamson, are you familiar with that concept?
I am. Actually, as part of the standards working groups, our general working group is within amusement rides, and that is one of them.
Okay. And in most of those situations, there's a attendant at the entry point of that slide. Is that correct?
Objection to form.
Do those slides usually have attendants?
Objection.
In my experience, yes.
Okay. And did this platform have an attendant?
Objection.
The evidence shows that Mr. Robertson was told at the top of the platform to scoot to the edge. So there was someone with some level of supervision at the top of the platform.
Would an attendant or somebody in a supervisory capacity also assist with proper putting on a harness in your experience?
Objection.
Yes, for zip lines, yes, this is the normal process, the level of supervision and instruction.
So, you know, a 9-year-old goes up to the pool slide with sunglasses on, a knife, and cowboy boots. Okay, let's just go crazy with it. Is it the pool attendant's job to say, young man, that's not safe to go down that pool?
Objection.
Correct?
This is correct. The standards for amusement rides under our committee says exactly this. Whether it's a zip line or a slide, the supervision, the level of supervision and requirements for these type of amusement attractions is that you actually on zip lines is the same. You can't carry knives, have glasses, have things that can fall, interact with the zip line, create a hazard.
The difference seems to me that you know, for a pool slide, do pool slides require harnesses?
They do not.
Okay. So at some point, you know, let's just say little Johnny, the 9-year-old, took his knife, his cowboy boots, and his sunglasses and ran past the guard and went down the slide, and got past her. Okay. Can that happen in a zip line? Can you just run to the zip line and go off of it?
Objection.
It's unlikely. It would be, I've never heard of it happen in the zipline industry.
Is that what Mr. Robinson did? That he just ran up the platform and just took off before anybody could stop him?
Objection.
Objection.
The evidence shows that Mr. Robinson did not just run up and jump off the top of the platform onto the zip line. In actual fact, this is not possible, because to get on the zip line as he did with his harness, tether, and trolley, that requires some setup. So he can't just run up and jump off. It's not really possible.
Does setup require time?
It does.
Okay. And going back to my 9-year-old who's just going to disregard his own safety, is it the attendant's duty to stop him from doing that?
Objection.
Yes, this is part of supervision. This is a fundamental requirement for operating zip lines.
So based upon the questions during cross-examination, it seems that there's some theory that this individual, Mr. Robinson, ignored all safety meetings and insisted that he was going to go down his way. Would that have been proper supervision from the camp's perspective?
Objection.
That's a failure of the Hunt Club to provide instruction and supervision. Again, these are my findings, is that these failures contributed to the incident.
A few more questions and I'll be done. There were some questions about the harness and whether or not the harness was too long or not. Regardless of the length of the harness, did Mr. Robinson complete the zip line where he landed on top of the platform?
The testimony says no. The testimony says he hit the platform before getting to the platform, getting to the top of the platform. So the obstruction that it created was the very thing that caused the incident, or one of the many contributors to it.
Regardless of the number of ropes that were attached, did any number of ropes stop Mr. Robinson from striking the platform?
The brake system including the supposed rope that was attached to the tower, if that was even there, was ineffective. So the braking system, if that's what they were aiming to do with these arrangement of ropes and other apparatus, was an improper guard, and it failed to arrest Robertson's speed before he reached the platform. So whether or not those ropes were in place doesn't matter. They didn't work.
Regardless of the relative heights of the objects or slopes of the line, were they designed such that it would prevent a consumer using this from striking the platform and injuring themselves within an expected use?
The way the Zipline was set up, the way the tethers were set up, the personal safety equipment, the way the brakes were set up, there was many things that had to happen to avoid hitting the platform. So this is a multiple levels of failure, any one of which could have caused impact with the platform. The fact that all of them were failures indicates the systematic failure of the system, the Zipline design, the brake design, the safety equipment, the failure to provide instruction and supervision. They all contributed.
Did Mr. Robinson arrive initially to the camp on a gurney?
Objection.
It's extremely unlikely. Now, this is not an expert opinion, but since you asked the question, someone being brought into a Zipline on a gurney, incapacitated, would not be able to ascend a tower. And so the implication is, I think, that did he arrive on a gurney or did he leave on a gurney? Well, according to the evidence, he left on a gurney. The testimony is clear.
And would somebody arriving on a gurney be qualified to allow him to use a Zipline?
Objection.
Someone who is incapable of climbing a tower and getting on a Zipline would be immediately disqualified under normal circumstances as being a person who could not, in fact, ride a Zipline.
Have you reviewed any other facts or evidence that shows that Mr. Robinson was injured before his collision with the platform?
Objection.
No, I have not.
That's all I have. Thank you.
I had a follow up. Give me a second here.
Okay.
Oh, in your opinion, as an expert, and your knowledge of how this was set up, this zip line was set up, and the safety measures in place, out of 100 people that went across this, what would you estimate be the amount of people that would be injured?
Objection.
I did not and have not made an estimation on injury rates on this zip line setup.
So take it. What would you think?
Objection.
Are you asking me to make an estimation without a full set of evidence?
Well, you have a full set of evidence enough to testify that this thing was dangerous. So if you determined it was dangerous, the level that you consider it dangerous would give you an idea of out of 100 people, how many people out of 100 would be injured if they went across a zip line, equipped the same as Mr. Robinson, and the zip line in the same condition as Mr. Robinson. Just a general percentage.
Objection.
Well, I don't have that evidence, one, so I can't make an opinion on it.
Well, would it be more likely than not that somebody going across in this system, would they be injured?
Objection.
It's a dangerous condition.
Okay. This is a dangerous sport, right?
No.
Objection.
No. Okay, so then the dangerous condition is the same for everybody.
On this zip line, in these circumstances, the dangerous condition is independent of the human. It is a dangerous condition. It's an exposure to a hazard. So there are many hazards, and putting someone on the zip line exposes them to the hazard. So let me just repeat so everyone understands what danger is. It's a combination of hazard, which there were hazards here, which is the ability to cause harm, and the risk, which is the likelihood of exposure, and to your point, more likely than not. So yes, when there's an exposure to a hazard, which creates a dangerous condition, and there's enough risk, which there was, which resulted in the incident, then you have a dangerous condition, and this created a dangerous condition. And where possible, these hazards should be eliminated. They were not.
Okay, you finished?
I am.
Okay. And typically when there's a dangerous activity going on, there's only so much you can do to get rid of the danger. That's when you warn somebody about the danger, correct?
Objection.
Yeah, so you position this as a dangerous activity on this zipline. In this incident, it certainly had dangerous conditions and hazards. And so if it's not practical to eliminate the hazards or hazard, it should be guarded against and warned against. And in this case, they failed to do all of that.
At least as far as you know.
The evidence is clear. I do know from the evidence, which is my opinion.
The evidence that you were provided is what you're testifying to, correct?
This is correct. This is the only evidence I have.
Okay. So you don't have all the evidence in this case, just what you were provided.
All the evidence I have, I'm making an opinion on.
Okay. I have nothing further. Ms. Stevens?
Yes, I have one question. In your opinion, is there a difference between a commercial zipline course and what would be considered an amateur zipline course?
So a commercial zipline course, one of which patrons are allowed on the course, whether or not it's paid for, it doesn't matter. But a zipline course that is provided where people can use the zipline falls into the area of what we would call the standard of care and standards for ziplines nationally and by state. And in a case like this, it's actually regulated. Florida regulates ziplines, and they lean into the zipline standards. It's from memory, but I believe it's an amusement space as same as the ASTM F24 committee, which is the one I work on. So this falls into the category of, we'd call it commercial. Whether or not that meets the dictionary definition, it doesn't really matter. This is a zipline that people could get on that was not someone's backyard.
And what would be considered an amateur zipline?
I've not heard that term used, amateur zipline, but I think you may be referring to something like a backyard zipline, something that someone decides that they'll put up for themselves, maybe between trees or something in their backyard. This was not one of those.
And what organization regulates in Florida? Are they federal regulated?
I'm going from memory here. It's state. There's no federal regulation for ziplines per se. The standards though are national, so actually international as well. So the standard of care is provided by the industry groups and ASTM International, so which I mentioned, I believe earlier, PRCA, Professional Ropes Course Association, and their American National Standards, the ANSI standards. There's two in the ANSI standards. The other one is the ACCT, or Association for Challenge Course Technology. Mm-hmm. And the third one, the consensus standards, which is ASTM International. That standard is for aerial adventure courses. Actually, they all are, and they all have ziplines, and they all talk about ziplines and provide standards and standard of care within the industry.
Okay, so if this wasn't considered a commercial zipline, are the standards different?
Well, this does fit the requirements for the standards because it's not a personal zipline, and it's not a personal zipline. This is used for other purposes, which is clear from the evidence. There's people attending this and getting on the zip line that are not the owners.
No further questions.
I have one follow-up because of that. How do you determine whether something's commercial or personal?
Well, in the context of the standards and regulations and standard of care, if it's not your own zip line, and other people get on the zip line, it's now subject to the standards of care and regulations.
So if I let somebody climb on my zip line out my back door, I now become commercial?
No.
Okay, so if this zip line was not open to the public, but only certain groups that were invited there for specific training, would that still make this commercial when there's no charge?
Objection.
Well, you're harping on the word commercial. What we're talking about is the application and applicability of the standards. So if it's not your zip line and you're not you doing it in your space, then it absolutely meets the standards.
So in my backyard, does it matter how many people I put across it before it becomes commercial?
Well, we're not talking about a backyard zip line here, and we're not talking about your zip line. We're talking about the Hunt Club zip line, different thing.
Right. And this zip line is not open to the public. So that would make it private, correct?
Objection.
Whether or not it's a privately run zip line, it's still subject to the standards and standard of care.
Mm-mm.
Safety is not optional. Safety is something that is a requirement for allowing people, private or not, of which actually most zip lines are technically private zip lines. They're owned by private organizations, but they do allow people on these zip lines for pay or not. So this one meets the requirements for the standards and is subject to exactly what I'm talking about and why I'm making these opinions. They fall under the standard and standard of care for zip lines.
Why does this one meet the standard for commercial? What makes it meet that condition?
Okay, you keep using this word commercial. We're talking about zip lines that people can use, that it's not the owner. So it meets all the requirements. It's a zip line that people can get on. They're provided equipment. They're provided the zip line, and they go down the zip line. So
how is it that a backyard one is not considered commercial or not considered? You're the one who used the word commercial through your testimony, and I guess we grabbed upon that and we're assuming that that's what you're talking about. So are you saying that this is not for commercial purposes?
Not what I said.
Okay, so is this a commercial? Did you feel that this is a commercial system?
To the point of my original statement, this is subject to the standards. It's all the criteria.
What makes it subject to the standards?
Well, there's nothing that makes it not subject to the standards.
Is a backyard line subject to the standards?
Not if it's only for the owner's use.
So the second the owner puts somebody else on it, now it becomes part of the standards.
Objection.
Okay, you're getting pretty far off the subject here because this is not that. We're talking about something else and apparently trying to draw a parallel to this zip line. In this zip line, in this case, this one is subject to the standards.
Okay, you're saying that, but you don't have all the evidence in this case, only what was provided to you. So I'm asking you, if this is somebody's backyard and somebody lets somebody else go off of it, does that then become part of the standards?
Objection.
This is not someone's backyard.
Sir, just answer it as I've asked you.
I'm answering it with facts.
Sir, it's already been determined you don't have all the facts. You have only the limited amount of facts that you were provided. There are other facts in this case that you're not aware of. And because of that, there are questions I'm going to ask you that you may not have been provided with facts of. But you can still, in your expert opinion, simply say, if this was a backyard zip line and I let my neighbor go down it, does that then make it subject to the standards that you're talking about?
Objection. Obvious move to strike. You can answer.
It depends. In your hypothetical example, in your hypothetical backyard with your hypothetical people going on the zip line, it may be. It's there are, depending on state law, which I am not a legal expert and I do not know Florida law, but depending on the circumstance and depending on the zip line, private or not, should someone provide a zip line for others, within the zipline industry, now we're talking about things like equipment that's available for purchase for zip lines. Would it be subject to standards? Well, there's no one answer to this. However, the equipment available for people to build their own zip lines in their backyard, using your example, does contain safety information, and that safety information borrows from the standards. It's like trampolines, same thing. If you buy a trampoline for your backyard, does it have safety standards and regulations? Regulations depend on the jurisdiction. The standards are industry standards, and yes, they certainly do. It's the same with zipline equipment. Should a person decide to put up their backyard zipline, they will need to, well, they don't need to, but they commonly purchase equipment, including the equipment you showed in your images for the harness, the tether, and the pulley. In fact, if you really want to drill down on the use of the equipment that the Hunt Club used, it's not appropriate for a correctly set up zipline. If we want to go down that rabbit hole, I'm quite happy to address it, but that's up to you. The equipment was inadequate. It contributed to the dangerous condition, and all these things contribute to the condition that caused the incident. So whether it was the strap being too long, whether it was the inappropriate guards and the failure of the braking system, whether or not it's in someone's backyard or not, having a person go on it's dangerous. In this case, it was dangerous, created a dangerous condition, resulted in an incident with an injury. This is not good. And this is why the equipment manufacturers and the industry provide many resources to do it properly. It's not hard to find, very easy to find, actually. You could get on Google and find all of this stuff pretty quickly, even for your backline hypothetical zipline. Now, whether or not your hypothetical zipline is subject to the standards, doesn't really matter. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the Hunt Club on this line. This is zipline with this incident.
Okay. Nothing further.
Nothing
No,
further.
no further questions. Thank you for your time.